Hey, what's up everyone? It's the Tyrant here, and a few weeks ago, you may remember, Naked Eli made a legendary return by being a guest on my channel after a 6-year hiatus of not posting anything on his channel. If you haven't seen that video yet, it's still online. It's a little over 2 hours long, so it is quite a long watch, but it's well worth your while, especially if you are a Naked Eli fan. Of course, Pro Ace Joker and Halo Completionist were there as well. And I'm just going to reiterate that it was such an honor having Naked Eli on and catching up with him and what he thinks of modern Halo, along other things. So what you may not know is he actually wrote a little bit of a review on Halo Infinite, but because he's not posting on his channel anymore, which, by the way, if you aren't already subscribed to his channel, even if he isn't posting, he still has lots of content there that's worth watching. I'd highly recommend subscribing and checking out his content. But he did write a review on it, or what he calls a quote-unquote brain dump. And it was basically a 5-page document, and he sent it to me and Pro Ace and also Halo Completionist. And so I read it, and I got to tell you, it was a really good review. I agree with a lot of things that he said. I don't agree with others. But what I did do is reach out to him and ask if I could read his review, quote-unquote, brain dump on my channel and share it with all of you. And he responded back and said, absolutely, that's fine. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to read his review to you, and then I'm going to follow up with my thoughts and opinions on his thoughts and opinions. And just so you know, I am quoting him directly on this, so let's go ahead and get started. So from Naked Eli, in regards to Halo Infinite. Overall good, but not great. 7 out of 10. Fun gameplay mechanics, especially the grapple hook to add movement, speed, and verticality. I enjoyed the varying battlefield layouts, but a terrible, cringy story, along with repetitive environments and objectives. It made me sad that it could have been so much better. I rocked Plasma Pistol plus Battle Rifle pretty much the whole game, then swapped the Plasma Pistol for the Sniper Rifle after I unlocked it with Valor. I felt the Battle Rifle was superior to the DMR to get me headshots at range. Given the DMR, he might mean Commando. Given the DMR loses accuracy on the second shot, and the Battle Rifle sprays as you swipe. Storm Rifle, not exactly sure of the name, but the Plasma Rifle was fun to occasionally swap in place of the Plasma Pistol. Sentinel Beam was fun for the last level, tearing through Sentinels and the final boss, or even just melting minions. Skewer was fun to one-shot things. Rockets were fun to give Marines as always. One time I gave 3 Marines 3 rocket launchers and they just went to town on one of the purple areas. Also, Rocket Hog at the end of the game with the rocket launcher side seat was fun. In terms of enemies, it was disappointing that the only new enemy in the game was the final boss. I enjoyed that fight, but it felt silly that the boss just sat in the center while enemies poured out instead of fighting you alongside the enemies. The Brute Berserkers were a nice addition to battlefields for aggro and killed me most out of all the minions when I wasn't careful. Jackal Snipers were a close second. My favorite enemy in the game was the Ultra Hunters with red cannons, and I really enjoyed the mini-boss battle against them in the last mission that forced me to move swiftly and swap between all my equipment at lightning speed with so little time to react to shoot them safely. My most hated fight was the 2 Brute Chieftains, one with the chopper, mid-game. As I read in one review, there is a special place in hell for whoever designed that fight. I felt I couldn't access ammo on the field without getting melted, and I walked into the fight with low ammo on both my Battle Rifle and Plasma Pistol. It was a long, brutal fight to take down each of them alongside the 4 Berserker Brutes. The story was painfully bad. To start, it's like Halo 4 and Halo 5 didn't even happen. No Didact, no Forerunner enemies, no Cortana, except her Echoes, which, by the way, is way overdone since they have been doing this since Halo 3. And no Guardians. The biggest threat to the galaxy where we left off. They just brushed most of these to the side to become mere reference statements, which is confusing to newcomers and unsatisfying for people who wanted to continue those storylines. Infinite wasn't a sequel as much as it was a forget about all that stuff that happened in the past 2 games. The sidekick was annoying, and his story arc wasn't even believable, where he changed completely after one conversation. He killed the vibe and momentum of the game frequently with his whining. Someone raised in a society with a 20-plus-year-old long extermination war against the Covenant would have a lot more stoicism. Also, late in the game, the implication is that his wife and kid are dead, which removes a lot of the urgent motivation to get home. Fake Cortana, or Fake Tana, was also annoying. She asked too many naive questions as a replica of the smartest AI in the universe. I did like the humanity that she brought, ironic as a digital non-human character, and how that was a direct contrast to both Chief and the real Cortana who murdered innocent people. Real Cortana in the end also seemed to apologize out of nowhere, and seemingly only because she was about to die. That arc for Cortana to go from evil to good could have been the central story of this game. Replacing her with Fake Tana seemed like a lazy way of putting the Chief plus Cortana duo together again. Also, Chief was a jerk when he lied to Fake Tana, and he didn't have any negative consequences as a result. They had an opportunity to drive character growth, but instead brushed it off with the Pelican Driver rescue breaking up the scene. Master Chief as a curt protagonist is no longer interesting. They really could have opened him up this game to become more human, but they passed on that opportunity with essentially zero character growth. The only inkling of development for him in the entire game was, I don't trust you, but I want to. The Banished were boring. Way too many holographic monologues. As a side note, where were the epic cutscenes? The Banished's reason for hating humanity should have been revealed at the beginning of the game so that we understood their motivations and could empathize with their cause. The final Banished boss's lines dying in Master Chief's arms wasn't believable, nor was the audio log he left behind where he said he might die. Since his character was full of bluster and arrogance, I didn't get the sense that that character was questioning his life choices, as Chief said. I liked how they introduced more boss fights overall, but I felt they all just turned into basically kiting mini-games since they were just normal enemies with more health and shields. One exception to this was the final Banished boss, who had the 4 battery packs, but he was so slow that it was easy to take those out and then resume the kiting game. While I enjoyed capturing fobs and using them to call in infinite weapons and vehicles, this was also completely unrealistic story-wise. You just landed on a ring with nothing but a single bullet and a magnum, and yet now you have infinite scorpions and rocket launchers? I get that you need to introduce game-like elements into video games, but this didn't align with the overall vibe of scarcity or make any sense with the predicament that Chief found himself in. The game crashed twice during hectic moments and cost me about 45 minutes of playtime. This reminds me that the save and load system was pretty bad. It's 2021. You can save progress for every checkpoint now. If I had to end game, I was often disappointed in how far back they brought me, so I had to repeat boring segments. Also, fast travel to some locations placed you way far away from that position. I think this is in part because the purple areas after capture often had enemies placed inside them again, which also takes away from the sense of accomplishments players had taking the base in the first place. Audio was solid overall. Voice acting was top-notch from our favorite actors as expected. I enjoyed the mix of old music with new, although part of me felt like using the old music as much as they did was trying too hard to please old fans instead of coming up with new stuff that had the same vibe as the old music. The wildlife on the rings seemed too scarce. Like, did Forerunners only populate the rings with 3 different species of bird? If you're going to bring in some animals, bring in an entire ecosystem and some variety to really make the place come to life. The story about the Endless was confusing even for people who have played all the games. I couldn't imagine how players who've never played Halo before felt. It also wasn't satisfying when that question wasn't even answered by the end of the game, and we didn't get to meet these characters who could have brought fresh life to the series. Maybe they're planning for DLC? If so, that's 10 hours too late in my opinion. If you're going to make people spend 20 hours learning about a new enemy, you should have that payoff start to happen in the second half of the game, like in Halo 1, how they brought the Flood in. That was epic because you had no idea that was coming until that level, and they did such a good job setting it up with the Marine cutscene. Either way, don't just keep it as an endgame teaser since the game doesn't have enough else going for it. The Marines were way too strong in this game, like stronger than the Chief. I watched one sit there and just take a beating from two brute berserkers like it was nothing, whereas Chief would have died in 2 hits. While this makes no sense story-wise, it did make having them as teammates more fun, and I tried harder to save them. They did a good job with lighting in terms of green for interest and red for enemies, so I knew where to head and where to avoid. Turning the tank slightly to the left or right was annoying since it often went in the wrong direction from the left stick. I heard there was an option to change this to Halo 3 settings, but I wasn't aware of that, and perhaps that should have been the default option. Glad they went with the hit scan instead of projectiles for rifles. Halo 2 shooting is greater than Halo 3. I did find it kind of silly that Infinite was marketed as open world, but really it's linear for half the game, and when it is more open, it locks you into little sections. If we're on a ring, I'd expect to be able to travel over the entire ring, not just a tiny section of it. They could have spread out this section across the ring to add scale and variety to the environments. Where is the snow? I appreciated the subtle nods to previous titles with lines like "I need a weapon," except for Cortana's echoes, which I've always found annoying as a storytelling mechanic. Grunts were hilarious. Joe Staten crushed it again with their voices and dialogue, adding an awesome layer of humor. Jackals had some good lines too. Elite skirmishers and brutes were still lacking in personality. Weapon zoom became a pain point. If I was double scoped in on sniper to 10x and then switched weapons, then switched back to sniper and zoomed in, it would bring me back to 10x instead of 5x. Basically, the game cached the zoom and state instead of refreshing, so I had to keep a mental note of which zoom state of my weapons were in. Pretty annoying and not what I would expect for a zoom experience. Experienced one audio bug where I changed equipment and it kept repeating that beeping noise. Then it continued over a cutscene before ending. The game definitely needs polish. Power seeds killed the flow of the game. Story-wise, why would a power seed be in the room next door? One time I found an optional power seed, carried it to the gondola, and all it unlocked was power weapons I couldn't use because they only had half ammo. At least give those weapons full ammo if I found a secret ammo cache. Changing equipment with the D-pad felt cumbersome, and I would frequently not press the second direction fast enough, so I would trigger something else on the D-pad like flashlight or bring up the grenades menu, and then click right to try to open the equipment menu, but just ended up changing grenades. They could have simplified this by removing equipment beyond the grapple hook, since that was so much fun and was almost always the most useful equipment given its short cooldown. Every time I went exploring, Fake Tana would repeat the same lines over and over in an attempt to drive me back to the main storyline. It's like the game didn't want you exploring its open world, which is the whole point of an open world. This one got on my nerves every single objective, and it reminded me of how annoying some of the Zelda AI could be. Or the Zelda AI could be. It seemed like they wanted to convey that UNSC is growing in strength as Chief recovers personnel and hardware from FOBs, but it never quite gets to the point where the UNSC feels competent. They never go back on the offensive. The mission is to save the pilot as an opportunity to have the UNSC Marines pile on. They could have used the never leave a man behind story beat while at the same time empowering the Marines to start fighting back. It would have been cool to save UNSC officers, perhaps being interrogated by the Banished, to build a viable UNSC counterforce. Imagine an all-out offensive from the UNSC with all the officers you saved leading the charge. Maybe that could have been the final Warthog run, where the more FOBs and officers you save, the more Pelicans, Wasps, Scorpions, ODST squads, etc. you get against an army of Banished trying to stop you from reaching the final tower. Would have had an epic Halo Wars 2 vibe. Maybe wouldn't have been possible with the performance limitations they were up against, but hey, a man can dream. The only Banished boss who was entertaining was Bassus. Spartan's not so tough, I think. Break open easy, soft inside. Chaklock, the Invisible Elite, also had great dialogue, reminiscent of the Halo 2 and Halo 3 days. Invisible walls that lock the player into certain routes in the open world were really annoying. They all have these islands on the map in the top right, but you can't actually access them, even after you've beaten the game. At FOBs, it was ridiculous that Marines would stand in the middle while the Pelican dropped vehicles, so they would often get murdered by the drop-off. They could also have improved upon ammo refresh. It was annoying to constantly scroll through the weapons menu just to top off ammo for my current weapons, usually battle rifle and sniper. Especially if I had less than one clip left, because then I'd have to order the new weapon, reload. Or order the new weapon, reload, then order the weapon again to top it off. The carousel also got longer and longer with each weapon unlock, which made this more and more annoying as the game went on. They could have had an infinite UNSC ammo machine or started the weapon selection process with your current weapons, so you wouldn't have to scroll through so much to get more ammo. I was also disappointed that the special named unlockable versions of the weapons were actually worse than the originals for their intended purposes. Like the BR, DMR, and Sniper all had short-range variants, but there are much better short-range weapons to choose from, so it would have been better to extend their scopes, ammo, or power at a distance, or something else that leans into their natural strengths. I expect the new battle rifle to have more range and more power at the same range, so I was disappointed in that unlock in particular. Another thought on flying around. Trees loaded one at a time for me as I approached them on medium settings. I assume this loading strategy also happens on Ultra, but I haven't confirmed. This reduced immersion for me. A more immersive loading strategy would have been to use low res from a distance, and then the resolution as you get closer, and then up the resolution as you get closer, so you don't just see trees popping up out of thin air. And finally, no replayability for levels makes it really annoying to get the collectibles, the skulls, and audio logs. I don't want to go out of my way for those on my first playthrough, and I don't want to replay the entire game to collect a few missing items. So that's Nak3d Eli's personal take, quote-unquote brain dump, I call it a review, and a very good one at that, on Halo Infinite. There are some things I agree with him on. His final point that he made regarding no selectable missions, that's a big one for me. The biggest things I do want to see added to campaign personally are co-op, selectable missions, and fresh mission restarts. For those of you who aren't familiar with that last one, if you're currently playing in a mission and you select restart mission, you don't start with the weapons that you originally had when you started the mission. You start with the weapons that you had when you click restart, as well as the ammo. And this has been an extreme inconvenience in some places, simply because I might have like 2% pulse carbine and one skew around, and I'll hit restart, and that's what I start with rather than what I originally had. So I do hope that they fix that when selectable missions and co-op become a thing. If they can fix it before then, that's even better. But hopefully that style does not continue. I do disagree with him on the story. Even though it's certainly far from the best Halo story, it is leagues better, at least in my opinion, of Halo 5. It's not as good as Halo 4's story, but that's okay. You know, for me, story is sort of a secondary thing. I've said this in previous videos. When it comes to video games, I'm more interested in the gameplay. If it has a great story, that's fantastic, but that's a bonus for me. I watch television and movies for a great story. I want gameplay out of my games. That's just me personally, though. It's kind of like my opinion on Halo 3. It's still currently my favorite Halo title, but I do think that overall it has one of the weakest stories in the game when you compare it to other ones like Halo 2, Halo Combat Evolved, and Halo 4. In terms of the sidekick or Echo, can't remember it off the top of my head, but in terms of the Pelican pilot, yeah, he did whine quite a bit. It was kind of nice seeing him become more supportive as the game went along. I don't think it was as jarring as Nak3d Eli made it seem. I can sort of understand his attitude in the beginning. I did sort of feel like he did progress. Maybe the story was drawing for some folks. In terms of his character development, I thought it went along fine. For Nak3d Eli, I would have probably suggested not using the battle rifle plasma pistol combination. The best weapons that I've seen, battle rifle is definitely up there, but I would have used the pulse carbine instead, since it has the best of all worlds, not just both worlds, all worlds, in that it's effective against enemy shields like any other plasma weapon out there, but it also locks on and can get headshots, unlike traditional plasma weapons. I mean, plasma pistol overcharge can lock on, obviously, but traditionally speaking, automatic plasma weapons have never been able to lock on. It's very easy to get headshots with this particular weapon, and in previous Halo titles, you really couldn't get headshots with a plasma weapon, or they at least weren't designed to do that, unlike ballistic weapons. I will say that in terms of mission design, I get where he's coming from in terms of the open world. It would have been nice to have had more open world segments. Really, we got maybe just a few missions with that. The third mission is kind of that way, but not really. It's a part of the open world, but it's a very small segment of it. There are places you can explore in the fourth and fifth missions, and then you don't really get to explore a lot until you get to Pelican Down and the sequence, and then after that, I don't know if any of the other missions have any real open world segments, because after you get to the get through the linear missions, then you're on the road, which is also linear, by the way, but you're still back on the ring, and then you get House of Reckoning, and then finally the Silent Auditorium. So I feel like as a game that was sort of marketed as open world, I do agree with him that there could have been more open world segments. What I'm hoping for is, as he mentioned in his review, that they do open up other segments of the ring, and we get more of that open world experience, as well as some of those diverse environments that we've seen in previous Halo titles. So overall, I do think he has a very solid opinion. We don't agree on all things. I do like the weapon sandbox in the sense that there's not a lot of repeat weapons that like we've seen in previous Halo titles. It's more akin to Halo Combat Evolved and to some extent Halo Reach. So I do like that aspect of it. Granted, some weapons seem less effective than others. In terms of unlocking the fobs, I do agree that there could have been a better organized way of getting more ammo for your current weapons. But overall, I personally found I didn't use fobs nearly as much. So again, that was his take. He didn't really mention anything about multiplayer microtransactions. Maybe he's kind of like me in the sense that he doesn't really play that much multiplayer. I mean, I know he used to, maybe he doesn't anymore, and he probably doesn't utilize microtransactions very much either, and I'm kind of in the same category. Just to sort of touch on that a little bit, obviously I'm not really in support of the way they implemented microtransactions this time. I thought Halo 5 was a lot more fair. They didn't seem as required there as they are here to get what you want, but regardless, I still think that my other thing that I would disagree with Nak3d Eli on is I still rate the campaign higher. Is it perfect? No. Could they have included a lot more stuff at launch? Absolutely. But I still enjoyed the campaign quite a bit. As I mentioned in my review for Halo Infinite, believe it or not, I actually still enjoy it more than Halo Combat Evolved, and I'm still crazy about that game. And despite its flaws, I still kind of, in my opinion anyway, rank it my second most favorite Halo currently. Halo 3 / Halo 3 ODST, and I bundle those two together always, is currently still number 1 for me. And could Halo Infinite pass that at some point? Maybe. You know, if the devs are willing to put their, you know, blood and sweat into it, if, you know, we can get some really good Halo Infinite DLC for the campaign, if they can add more playlists to multiplayer, especially social, like Griftball and Infection, and hopefully Warzone or Warzone Firefight, similar to the one that we had in Halo 5, and just Firefight in general would be great. I'd still love to see the inclusion of the Flood at some point and see maybe the dynamics of the semi-open world environment change with Flood-infected areas. I think that'd be awesome. I know some people aren't as thrilled about the Flood as I am, but I did think they were a great enemy to fight in the original trilogy, and I was really thrilled to see that 343 brought in a Flood firefight mode for Halo 3 ODST in the Master Chief Collection. So you guys let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below on Halo Infinite, on the current state of Halo Infinite, and what you thought about Nak3d Eli's opinions on Halo Infinite, what you agreed with and what you didn't agree with. And I want to take a moment to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and watch this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope you'll consider subscribing for more great content right here on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Nak3d Eli, for letting me post your review on this channel and read it on your behalf. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful week. I'll catch you all right back here next time, and as always, I'm the Tyrant, signing off.